Hey, it's Don here. This is a gas pedal out of this CJ5 that was built in 1977. I had some great adventures in this thing, and we did a lot of rock crawling and whatnot, and then I put it away for 18 years. 18 years it sat there rusting away. It was already rusty, but deteriorating, and we are putting it back together, bringing it back to life, doing a full restoration with some modifications. So we'll call it a resto mod. If you're here for the first time, welcome. If you're coming along with me for the whole ride, you know that the last time we were together, we put the clutch and the brake pedals back roughly in so that we could get our clutch linkage hooked up. And now we need to get the tub alignment done again for about the 87th time. And then we'll bolt it up, get it firmed up so it can't go anywhere. And then we can finalize our clutch linkage and figure out if we are going to bump into our headers when we push the clutch in. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do about that if we do. And then we'll get back up here and we'll start to look at where our wiring harness is going to go, fuel lines, all that stuff, and see if we can get the front end of this thing ready to be buttoned up with fenders and grill and so forth. So strap in, got a lot to do today. I got the Jeep out in the middle of the garage here so I can get all the way around it. So without further ado, that's what I'm going to do. All right, well, do not alert the media and be very careful who you share this news with. But this tub is bolted to the frame, bolted down tight. So now we get to go peek around and see where some of our tight tolerance stuff was and how it lined up. But maybe, fingers crossed, this is the time that will stay. We'll see. I'll let you know. Okay, well, here we are. We do have the clutch bolted in place, and if I retract the clutch pedal as far as it will go where it will be when we're not pressing on the clutch, you can see we got plenty of room here. But as we were to push on the clutch with our foot in there to disengage it, you can see we are definitely hitting that header pipe right there. So I'm not really sure if it's going to have to come all that way down to disengage the clutch. We're going to have to check that, but that might be a problem, and I'm not sure how we're going to fix that. So stay tuned. We'll deal with that when we make it a little further. Just coming up, panning up a little bit here in my brake area, I am going to have to order I'm going to order a power disc brake or a power brake master cylinder conversion kit. And I think it's about a 8-inch round booster that goes here. And I was kind of worried a little bit about space here. I was up there upstairs getting ready to look at ordering one of those, and they were saying, oh, you got to make sure it isn't going to intrude on your air cleaner. But I think we got plenty of room there. So I'll work on getting that done. And it's really cold today, so the garage is not very warm. And it's just a weekday evening, so I'm not really going to get any work done tonight. But I did want to make sure I looked in a little closer detail at that clutch linkage and see how we're looking there. So we'll have to do something about that. All right, well, you remember that another place that we have pretty tight tolerances is on our muffler and our tip. So I decided what I was going to do is I bobbed an inch off each end of the tubing that was pre-welded into the mufflers. And so I could have done this with my angle grinder with my cutoff wheel, but I decided to go get me a pipe cutting tool from the auto parts store. Now, I just rented this thing. So they rent it to you. They say, keep it for 90 days. If you want to keep it forever, then we'll just bill your credit card. Otherwise, we'll give you the full amount back. So it's essentially free rental. And this works okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still a lot of work, because it's pretty thick pipe there. And it takes a fair amount of sweating and cursing and whatnot to squeeze that thing, hold it tight, and go around this pipe a half dozen or a million times and get that thing cut off. But I did get it eventually. Now when that cuts off, it winds up kind of pinching the end of the tube in just a little bit. So when I tried to slide my collector in there, it was just tight enough it wouldn't really go in there. So I just grabbed the Dremel and took the burrs and kind of roughed it up, or just kind of ground it back a little bit so that my collector would fit in there. Now you'll notice I am trying to remember, I made sure I put my little bolt holder on around that ring around the collector. I was really worried that I was going to forget to do that, and I was going to weld the whole thing up and find out that I didn't put my ring around there and wouldn't have anything to put the bolts through. But luckily, I remembered. And then we just bust out the welder and welded them up. Now on this end I'm doing the back because I've already done the front end, so I didn't show you that here, but the welding went okay. I did practice a bunch before I started welding this back up, so I feel like my rusty old welding skills are recovering. So got it all welded up, one side's ready to go, and I'll do the other side, and then I'll take that pipe cutting kit back to the store and get that all returned and everything be ready to go, and then I can figure out what kind of hangers I need, because I am going to put one hanger on the back end of the muffler here where I put the clamp around that holds that little chrome tip on it. Okay, we got a little bit of a mess here under the firewall, but let me just show you what's going on here. So I've moved the air cleaner off, so I have a little bit more room to work. This guy right here is our main harness for the fuel injection system, other than the part of the harness that comes with, that's hooked right into the actual injectors. So we have this big connector on the back of this guy, which goes right here, and every connector on this thing is a different size. They're all extremely well labeled, and they're all keyed, so you can't plug them in the wrong way. So this is pretty idiot proof. There's a solenoid here. That'll just need to be kind of mounted to the firewall or to the fender. There's a fuse holder here, same thing, just gets mounted up. And then I've got a couple of other connectors here for other little kind of chunks of this wiring harness. I dropped one, bear with me. Okay, so this guy right here goes in here, and this end comes over here, connects up to our distributor. Now I have just slid the distributor in there. You can kind of see, maybe you can see it, maybe you can't right there. There's a 1 stamped on the thing. So that's plug number 1, goes there, and that's the one that we're going to have our arm pointed at when we get cylinder 1 over here to top dead center as we place the distributor in there for real. Right now, I've just barely slid it down in the hole just to get it in there. So we got the O2 sensor. This big module right here is kind of the brains of the unit, and that plugs into this big main connector here and kind of levers down into place. This, I'm thinking, will probably go right back here on the firewall, right behind the engine. And then the other thing that we need to make room for on the firewall will be our fuel pressure regulator. And if you recall, with this guy, we had our little gauge here. So this gauge is intended to go right here, sticking out of the front of this fuel pressure regulator, so you can see what your pressure is set at while you're kind of tuning it on the fly. I'm thinking this might come over here on the firewall somewhere where we can bring our main fuel line over, take our return line back down, and tap into that hard line somewhere down there. I'm going to adjust where that ends up because it's pretty close to the headers over there. But we'll get the gauge in there, we'll get that roughed in where we think we want that guy. And those are the things that need to go on the firewall back here. So we really have that big module, we have a couple of solenoids, and then we just have to kind of mount the rest of this cable somewhere and tie it off. And then you'll know, obviously, from that square hole over there, and I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but that's where our main fuse line comes in. So we'll have about 1 inch loom of wiring that will come over here. Some of it will come down to the batteries, some around to the alternator and the coil and the headlights and all that stuff. So we've got a fair amount of stuff that's going to be going on that firewall. It's probably going to be really fairly, challenging to get it all there in the right order. I did buy new plug wires, so as we go through this, we'll be putting on new wires from our distributor to our spark plugs, and so we'll have to kind of mount those, route those as well. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of work to get all this stuff laid out, and I'm sure it's going to take a while and some doing it over and whatnot. So for right now, if you'll bear with me, I'll turn the camera off. I'll mess around with this for a while, and I'll come back when I think I have everything laid out. And don't panic, I am going to cut this thing down a little bit because it sticks up about 3 inches out of our air cleaner. So obviously we need to bob some of this off and get this further down in, but we'll do that at some point. That's not a big deal, but I am going to fix that. So there we go. Like I said, we got a lot to do, a lot of planning, thinking, laying it out, seeing if I can figure out some way to kind of rough it all in, make sure I'm good with it, and then start drilling and putting stuff in place. Now what I'm doing when I'm going through my firewall is I'm putting those little 5/16 bolts through there. I'm putting them through from this side through. I'm putting a lock washer or a nylon nut on the opposite side, and when I get done with those, just because there is the duct work and so forth for the heater and all that stuff in there, I'll take my little Dremel in there and I'll just snip off the ends of the bolts that are sticking out of those nylon nuts just a little bit to make so that they're not kind of getting in my way. So there we go, a lot to do, and I'll bring you back and show you how it's going. Now I am gonna probably tackle the fuel system first, because the one thing I am a little bit concerned about is heat in my fuel lines. I know it should be fine. It's not going to be too close to anything really hot, but I remember as a kid growing up, we had an old, like a 1963 Chevy paneled truck with a big old straight six in it, and that thing would vapor lock on us. So I remember my dad we'd be out camping in the middle of the summer, and it would die, and we'd pull over the side of the road, and he would get out there and do some mojo under the hood or something while he was trying to cure the vapor lock. And I remember him saying, "Oh, it's vapor locking." And in my mind, I had this vision of the fuel line getting too hot and basically just vaporizing the fuel inside of that line and making us a big old ball of air in there that then couldn't move around. Now, if that was really what was going on, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. That's what I thought was happening. That's the way he described it. So I don't want to have any vapor locks in this thing. And the reason that I'm concerned about heat is because I'm always concerned about heat in these things, especially, we go to Moab a lot, and it's really hot in the summer down there. I mean, it's really hot, and you're just crawling along, so you're not moving any air through this engine compartment, and heat is really, in my experience, has been a problem with older vehicles. The cooling systems weren't as advanced and whatnot. So as I'm putting this together, I'm really trying to pay attention to the things that get hot and make sure that I'm staying away from those. And when I source my radiator, I'm going to be trying to put a big, thick Mamma Jamma in there that's got plenty of cooling capacity and a big, strong electric fan to keep it running all the time, so I can keep the heat under control. So that's why I'm obsessing about heat, if you're wondering why. All you guys that live in, Minnesota or something, you probably don't have to worry so much about heat when you're building a 4x4, but out here in the desert, we do. So there's that. All right, well, so I placed my module here for the fuel injection in a couple different places here. Tried right behind, way over there. There's just so much wiring harness that I started to think it might work best if it's over here on the fender somewhere. So I wanted to place the fender in place so I could see how that looked. Now, here's our problem. Here's what I kind of was worried about. So I tried to bring the fender in. You can see that this portion of the fender down here, where it's bent out, is indeed going to be right where those header tubes are. So that was one of my fears about these outside of the frame headers was, you know, that section right there is normally closed up with this part of the fender. So got a little modification to do to get that to fit, and I'll try to take some measurements and figure out how much of that I have to bob off. I might have to go right to where the fender drops down. So I'll do that, and then I'll get this fender mounted up here, and I may have to set the grill back to kind of support the front end of it, and then I'll see if it makes sense to put that module on the fender. If not, then I'm thinking maybe over on that side again, just to use up some of this wiring harness, because this is the portion that plugs into that module, and then we, you know, all our connectors are way far away from there. So you can see how far I had from this connector to the main injector firing section is 3 feet or something, you know. So that's why I'm thinking, again, if I'm kind of laying it out here, it looks to me like maybe over here is not too bad, or maybe down here somewhere. I don't know, maybe I should go make a new hole through the firewall, take it inside. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But first of all, before we can go any further, got to do something about this fender, so I'll do that. All right, well, the fab work is done on the passenger side fender. So let me show you how we wound up down in here. So pretty much the entire part of the fender down there that flattened out, and a little bit of the fender itself, the curved part here, had to be cut out to make room for the headers. So I'm sure I'm gonna have to do that on the other side. Now I just have this bolted in lightly, and right now I'm just sitting on a piece of wood up here at the front because I don't have the grill in. But what I'm starting to think is I may pull the battery out, because I have a pretty good space here behind the battery, and the battery's not going anywhere. So I may bring this wire harness around behind the battery and indeed come over here on the fender somewhere for my module. So I'll do that. I'm gonna yank the battery out of there again. I've just had it in there to make sure I cleared my breather tubes, but looks like that might be the way to go. And then I still have a little bit of room around the top here where I can bring my hot wire around, or my wires that have to be hot to go over to my fuse panel. So that's what it looks like so far. I think it'll be all right. And then just not, here's, if we look under here, you can kind of see how we came out there. Come down here, give you a view. So mud and stuff's obviously gonna come up here to some degree, but I don't really think there's anything we can do about it. If I was overly concerned about it, I suppose what a guy could do is fab up a little piece of tin or, you know, metal from maybe this lip here, come over and put some little 90-degree brackets on there and put something there just to kind of excuse me, just to close that off. But I think it'll be all right. What do you think? So I don't know, you know, if you've got a 304 and you're using Hedman headers, or any headers for that matter, that go outside of the frame, I'd like to hear from you. If you got a minute, just drop me a comment down there and tell me if you've had these same struggles. And if you're on this similar project, man, be careful when you're ordering your headers and don't do what I do and buy the wrong dang ones. You know, in retrospect, maybe I should have just sent them back and got the right ones. But now I'm kind of, now that I've started to cut sheet metal, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound, right? So I'll stick it out, but I'm not in love with these things. So there you go. All right, well, I ran my cable around behind the battery box, and this connector over here, the main one to the injectors, would work just fine. But this one has got to go to my distributor, and that's a foot apart, not going to reach there. So that one might be the limiting factor here. Just get up close and personal again in here. So I suppose maybe that's not where that's got to go. So maybe what we'll do is work backwards from this connector for the distributor. So that's going to put a connector roughly right in here somewhere, which means I gotta have, let's unhook that. We're gonna come back out from behind our battery box. That's this one. Man, where are you supposed to put all this stuff, guys? Maybe I should be going down. You know, so if we come along here, that might be the way to go. So taking my distributor cable down this driver's side of the engine gets me where I could have my connector kind of maybe even zip tied right here to the injector rail, and then that might be pushing me back over to somewhere over on this side. But we're not obviously way far away from the fender over here. There's no way we're going to get to the fender. So if we bring it over this way, we're going to have to be on the firewall there somewhere. Or, like I said, maybe you're supposed to put this inside, go through the firewall somewhere and put it inside. That hole would not quite be big enough, so it's going to be a pretty big hole to get it through the firewall, unless you come through the other direction with all your connectors, which probably isn't going to make the hole any smaller. Not sure I got this figured out yet. All right, well, we're back here around the back of the throttle body, and I think what's gonna determine where things go is this shortest piece of the harness right here. It's the one that goes to the distributor with this plug, but this plug is the idle air controller, or idle air something or other, idle air something, I don't remember what it's called, but anyway, that guy plugs in right here. And you can see it's kind of a four conductor plug. So I'm going to plug that one in, and then we're going to come around and see the other, like I said, the other lead on this goes to the distributor. So based on how this thing's going to lay out is, I think, going to kind of drive how the rest of this is going to go. So let's put that in and see what we got, because otherwise I'm just kind of guessing here. So I think if I start to actually physically hook stuff up, we'll have a better idea how to place things. So let's do that. Okay, so here's what I've done so far just temporarily here is I've kind of, this one's not clamped in tight, but it's together enough for me to see where it's going. And I zip stripped the cable here around the injector rail just to hold it in place, because this is my distributor connection, and with that idle air control coming out here, it's got to kind of turn a big old 180-degree turn here, and then the biggest part of the cable goes down to the distributor. This is the coil connector here, so this will go up to the coil. This one I think is air temperature, so I don't know where that goes yet, but that's the only wire I have here that I don't have a home for yet. So let's spin around to the back here. Now there's our main connector that goes to the injectors themselves, and you can see I'm getting pretty far around the corner with that thing here. So I am, and then, you know, here's how much cable I've got still. So it's not gonna make it really very well behind the battery box here and make it clear over to the fender. So I'm starting to think what we might wind up doing is kind of making a big U-turn here and coming back over kind of maybe like that. So that might not be too bad, and that would put our module kind of right in the middle like I thought. So that may be where we wind up doing this. Now I do have way too much cabling here for my fuel pump, because one of these long leads is for the fuel pump and is about, you know, you can see how much cable I got to work with here. So there's that one and this one, which are quite long. I think this one might be my, let's see. Yeah, so there's my fuel pump wire. So I'll have to get my cabling over there hooked into it, but you can see again, I'm clear up here standing in front of the Jeep, and these two have all kinds of room. And then my last one that's kind of hanging down here is that one that's got to go to the air sensor in the exhaust pipe. So that's probably what I think I'm gonna do for now, is I'm gonna kind of go at this assuming it's gonna come out here and just turn a big U-turn, go up above that right there, and come with my module kind of right in the center here. So I think that's what we're gonna try and do. All right, well, I'm reading through the instructions here, and what it says to do is roughly what I'm doing, you know, kind of mounting on the firewall. But they said you want that control unit as far away from spark plug wires and all that stuff as possible. And one of the places that they suggest putting it is inside of the cab. So here's where we're at. I'm gonna go out and retrieve the heater components, the duct work and the fan and all that for the heater, and bring those back in and see where they lay out and see how the room goes in there for a place to put this. So let me grab you. Let's have a look inside here. I'm thinking maybe up here, maybe down here. There's a pretty big flat spot here. We could maybe get it, you know, like sitting here like this or something, and potentially come through this hole right here, which is already cut out on the other side. Again, spinning you around. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's a cutout right down there where if you did have air conditioning, that's where your air conditioning hoses would go in. So I'm gonna have to do that. So I guess what we're gonna do is we're gonna leave this question unanswered of where it's all gonna fit for right now. And I'm gonna have to get to the point where I can get the car out and get out in the Jeep graveyard and bring a bunch of stuff in. So I'm gonna call this one a halt, and you'll just have to come back around next time and see how this stuff's all gonna line out. But I think it's gonna be manageable. I think it's gonna work okay. Again, everything's labeled well. I like this system so far. It's just a little trick to put it in there, but I knew it was gonna be. So let's not stress about it. Let's just get the stuff in here that I need to get, see how much room I got to work with, and then we'll take it from there. So I'll see you next time around. We'll answer that question.